Hello everybody, this is Miss Howington here at Research Triangle High School. Today we're going to talk about physical weathering. So first we need to define weathering. Weathering is just the process of breaking rocks and sediments into smaller pieces, or breaking rocks down into sediments. So weathering is one of the steps in the rock cycle. So weathering turns rocks into sediments, which can then be transported or eroded. And sediments can then also be turned into sedimentary rock. Also, weathering is the first step in soil formation and therefore the first step in primary succession. So if we remember, primary succession is when succession happens when there is no soil present at all. It's just bare rock. So there's two kinds of weathering, chemical and physical weathering. Today we're just going to talk about physical weathering. So the definition of physical weathering is a mechanical process that breaks down rocks into smaller pieces and eventually into sediments. There's several different ways that this can happen. We're going to talk about two main ways. The first way is wedging. So if you see over here in our background picture, things have gotten into this crack in the rocks and are gradually pushing that rock apart. So they're making this huge bedrock. It'll eventually break off a piece. So this can happen in a variety of different ways. You can have ice wedging. So this generally happens in climates where you have freeze-thaw cycles, so it gets cold enough in the wintertime to form ice, and then warm enough in the spring and summer to melt the ice. So the water will get down into the crack, and then as water freezes, it expands, so it'll push that crack apart, making the crack larger and larger until eventually it will cause smaller pieces of rock to fall off. This can happen through biological agents. So plant roots will get down into a crack in the rock and they'll start to grow. And as they grow, again, they push the rock apart, eventually breaking that big rock into little pieces of rock. This can also happen with like burrowing animals. They can get into a crack and gradually push it apart as well. This can also happen with mineral crystals, like maybe salt near a coastal area. So if sea salt got into a crack in a rock and then those salt pieces started to crystallize and form salt crystals down in the crack, it'll eventually push that rock apart and break it into smaller pieces. The same thing can happen with lava. So lava can be the thing that comes up and pushes the rock apart. The other way that we're going to talk about that physical weathering happens is abrasion. So this can happen via moving water. You could have a stream that is moving very quickly and picks up rocks and smashes them into each other, and that smashing is breaking those rocks down into smaller pieces, or maybe even a waterfall where the force of the water itself hitting the rock at the bottom is causing the rock to kind of chip off into smaller and smaller pieces on the edges. Glaciers, as they retreat and as they move, so glaciers will move if it melts a little bit and they get a little bit of water underneath them, they'll slide downhill. And then as they melt, they'll retreat, and a lot of times they have little pieces of rock underneath them, and so all the weight of that big sheet of ice of the glacier is on top of those rocks, and it's dragging those rocks across the bedrock, which causes abrasion. So it's scraping those rocks against that bedrock. And then, as you can see in our background picture here, these rock formations were created with the help of wind abrasion. So the wind will pick up small pieces of sediment like sand and will smash them against a rock face and eventually wear down that rock face. It's kind of like taking sandpaper and rubbing it up against a piece of rock for a really long time. All right, so that is all that we have to talk about today for physical weathering. And I just wanted to give a quick thanks to all the people who helped by contributing photos to this video. All right, guys, see you later.